When you have a team of leaders, when you build a leadership pipeline, developing people inside of your team, now you got other people that you're able to trust with those oars, right? Because if paddles, sorry.
A little pet peeve of mine, oars are for rowboats.
There you go.
They're connected to the boat. A paddle is in your hand. Welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And shifting gears, that's one thing I think we've always been good at.
Solving big problems or shifting gears?
Well, if you're not good at shifting gears, then a problem can become a big problem very quickly. And I think it's not in an avoidance way. It's in a, all right, well, that didn't work, so let's go here. We had a good friend of ours scheduled, and they had a family emergency. Somebody got hurt, hospital, all that sort of stuff. So we shifted and
shifted outside.
We shifted outside, which both of us always prefer to do things outside, especially this time of year in Tucson.
Oh yeah.
And this summer in Colorado, we'll do more of these outside in Colorado too. And I think the shift ability, I think what that leads to is something that I've really started defining for myself with this phrase lately, that I call it a propensity to action. And you've heard me talk about putting the paddle in the water to steer the canoe, and all these different types of metaphors. I think if you have a propensity to action, you are less likely to be impeded by problems.
Yeah.
Because you see the problem as a challenge. You see it as, all right, well, that didn't work, let's do this. Well, that didn't work, let's do this. And I think that propensity to action comes from the ability to lead.
No, definitely. I think that it's just having the honest assessment of the situation. Hey, this thing ain't working. What are we going to do to change it? Hey, this isn't quite right. What do we want to do to adjust? And I think that's where so many people freeze. We talk all the time about the paralysis analysis and all that. You can get stuck on those things so easily, and if you're able to shift gears and kind of just completely leave it, just flush it. We use that term all the time in sports, right? Hey, flush it, next play, best play, that kind of thing, right? If you're able to do that, it doesn't mean you don't learn from those mistakes, learn those lessons, those kind of things, but it allows you to just kind of reset yourself and get back to moving forward. And the reality is that most of the time, that's going to help you. Yeah. If you're able to properly assess your situation, take leadership over yourself and start taking action, then what that's going to do, you get that little bit of momentum back, you can build upon it, all those kind of little things start to add up, and you can learn from your mistakes. The freezing on the mistake, I think, is this desire to get things right, perfectionism a little bit, and then you kind of just get mad at yourself and start beating yourself up over all these kind of things. And the thing is, when I talk about flush it with those things, it doesn't mean you're not going to assess that mistake. It doesn't mean you're not going to learn from it. What it means is right now you're not going to learn from it. Your job is to go do the right thing. And then we're going to watch some film later and we're going to talk about how bad your tackle form was or whatever the thing is there, right? It's really easy to build that system for it. And I think going back to the business side of things, that's where I think a lot of people get frozen, is they get stuck between the idea of actually learning and solving the problem versus taking the action to solve the problem. I think that a lot of people view that as separate things. I guess you don't have film sessions in business usually, so maybe that you probably should, yeah. So maybe that's part of why you don't see it as much. But I think that's the problem. There is that you don't have the priority to take the action, which gets things moving, how to fix the problem, and then have the foresight to know, hey, in the future we're going to take the time, we're going to have our film session, go back and analyze this and figure out how we want to move forward better.
Yeah, well, and while you were going down that path, I started thinking, I've talked about the paddle in the water before, that metaphor that I love using, but I thought I'd go over that again here, because believe it or not, there might be somebody out there that has not seen that Whiskey Words.
I was going to say the Whiskey Words are pretty freaking popular, so we'll see.
Yeah. But so here's where this metaphor comes from, and I think it's such a great way of thinking about that, moving forward into action and leading that way. Is when I was a teenager and I was a Boy Scout and Explorer Scout, we would canoe down the Brazos River. And those of you who've never been to Texas and seen the Brazos River, it's a really long lake, is what it is. It doesn't have a whole lot of current. I mean, there's some ripply areas when it gets really shallow, which is a lot of places around the sandbars and the rock bars, the gravel bars more. But there ain't a whole lot of current. But you could sit down in your canoe and float down that river and never have to do anything. I know a lot of people that the inner tubing on the Guadalupe in southern Texas, just outside of San Antonio, is a huge thing in the summertime, and there's a couple of rivers, believe it or not, in Colorado that people freeze their little tushies off.
We got the Salt River here.
Yeah, and so floating down it. But when you're floating in an inner tube, you have no way of steering because you're just flowing with the current. You're just kind of drifting along. Same thing if you're in a canoe on the Brazos River, you're drifting along. And what happens is, because the river, she has a mind of her own, she will put you into a sandbar. She will put you into a low-hanging branch that has some nasty bugs and bees and fire ants and all kinds of crazy stuff in Texas, that when you run into that branch, they're falling all over you. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't prefer that. So I like to avoid those things. And the way that you avoid it is you got to paddle. And you quite literally have to go faster than the current. It's called friction. Because the friction that your boat creates by going in a direction, you're putting your paddle in the water and pulling that canoe faster than the current, that enables you to steer the canoe. And we can get into the strokes and the pull stroke and J stroke and all these sort of things, but none of those strokes work unless you're going faster than the current. And that's that propensity to action. It's, all right, here's a problem. Am I going to run into that tree, that sandbar, that rock, that bush that's hanging over, or even the banks that hang over? Or am I going to put my paddle in the water and pull so that I'm going faster than the current and I can steer and control what's going to happen to me? Because I can control things if I'm moving.
Yep.
I have control of what's happening when I'm moving. And the more you think about it in that sense, the way you take control of your life is you lead your life. And you lead your life, that word, what is it, lead, like I'm leaning into it. I ain't going to get into the Latin of it because I have no clue.
No freaking clue.
But it is that sort of thing of I'm leading. It's a lead step. I take that action because I can stand here and pivot all day long in a circle and never get anywhere, right? All I'm doing is say, well, what about that direction? I don't know. What about that direction? I don't know. What about that direction? Or You can sit there in the boat and just float down the river, run into a bush and stop, get stuck. Or you can put your paddle in the water, take action, and pull. And what you were talking about is, well, when you do take that action, well, how about learning from it, right? Did I pull the right way? Did I tackle the right way? Did I make that right decision at the right moment about the business and pursuing an opportunity or partnering with somebody or hiring a vendor or, you know, all those hundreds of variables that we have in our business? It's taking the action.
Yeah.
Because when I take the action, it's either right or it's wrong. Can't be indifferent. But all three of those, I'm learning something.
Yeah, and you can't sit there and just like, you know, in the rugby example of like you miss a tackle and you're so upset about missing the tackle that you mess up your play and all that. When you're drifting into that sandbar, you can start paddling, or you could go, gosh, I really should have steered right about 100 feet ago. It's like, well, ain't really doing you any good. Shoulda, woulda, coulda, right?
Yep.
Doesn't do you any good. And I think to take the metaphor that we're talking about here to the next level on it, it's each person, each leader has that opportunity inside of a business, right? If you have multiple people in your canoe, we're gonna see how long this metaphor holds water.
Whoa, so our canoe holds water.
Yeah, I know, right?
Holds water out.
So what a lot of people have in their business, they got this big old canoe full of people, and only got the one paddle. They got the CEO, and I got the vision, and I'm gonna shear. And sometimes they're super active, and they're being proactive, and they're carrying things forward. But what happens is that's only one person who is analyzing the situation, being proactive with it. Everyone else just along for the ride. What you want to do inside
they're
of the team,
grabbing those branches when you get all caught up in them along the bank is what they're doing.
Swinging the back end.
They're quite literally protecting themselves. They're not doing anything for the organization that is the people in the canoe.
Exactly. And that's also, to talk about protecting themselves, that's just being caught in the whirlwind, right?
Yeah.
Being caught in that whirlwind of your day job and not able to be proactive with anything, right? And so everyone on your team is just caught in that whirlwind. You're the only one rowing, trying to get you in the right direction. When you have a team of leaders, when you build a leadership pipeline, developing people inside of your team, now you got other people that you're able to trust with those oars, right? Because if paddles, sorry.
A little pet peeve of mine, oars are for rowboats.
There you go.
They're connected to the boat. A paddle is in your hand.
So we got all these paddles in there. There we go. Got it. Right. And so you got all these paddles, and when you have somebody that you have taught how to lead, taught them how to see, I just paddle, not row. Taught them how to paddle. That's going to mess me up all day. Taught them how to paddle. Now you can hand them out, and they can help with it. And it's not just hey, you taking a shift, and you're the leader right now, because that's what happens sometimes. You know, you got a leader inside of a small team. You say, hey, you're in charge right now. I'm going to go over here, and I trust you to lead this small team. It's also they can be proactive from their perspective, what they see. Instead of reacting to the whirlwind, getting stuck in the whirlwind, now they can start to paddle with you, be more proactive with it, make the adjustments that they're seeing, because they have a different perspective in the canoe, just like they have a different perspective inside of your business. But because they're leaders, because you give them ownership, they're able to actually take those actions. They're able to make those small adjustments where things aren't quite right, or we're going the wrong direction, or I see something coming down the path that I'm not too happy about. Whatever it is, I can then have the power to make that adjustment inside of the business. And I think that's the key to having that team of leaders. And what that does is you get somebody who can take control of their own environment there, but then also the big thing is you have a pipeline of leaders, right? So, and this is where I'm completely lost in the metaphor at this point now. I guess you could have captains and first mate and all that kind of stuff or whatever. But anyway, the idea being that as you develop those people, you give them more and more responsibility, bigger roles and those kind of things. They get better and better at their job. And then what happens when somebody's sick? You have somebody who can step up. What happens when somebody gets that nice high ticket offer from another company and they want to go be a COO somewhere instead of your manager? Hey, guess what? You could say, hey, best of luck to you. I got somebody else who's ready to step up with it. And you're building that pipeline up, and it allows your whole team to be proactive, your whole team to put those paddles into the water. And when you do that, it takes a lot of the responsibility off of you. There's this weird thing That happens. I went through this with Engage. You and I have talked about this off camera before. Went through this with Engage the last couple of years as I kind of just became this like director role. I'm not really coaching that much anymore, right? Well, what happens is you are relying on the leadership of your team, and you have to be hands off with that. That's the really freaking hard thing. So it's a lot easier as a leader. You have a lot less pressure, but at the same time, it's a lot harder. I don't know. I think there's an interesting piece there. I know that's not quite in the leadership pipeline conversation, but it's just more in the delegation of things. But I think that's the real key, is by developing those folks, you can build that pipeline, and then you always have somebody who's ready to step up, that next man up mentality.
Well, and I can continue that with the canoes because canoes, generally speaking, there are two people in it. The person at the front is the power. The person at the back is the driver. And the way that we always did it is we would pair people who knew what they were doing in the canoe with people who didn't. And the person who didn't, you put them in the front. Because all they got to do is stick your paddle in the water up here and pull it back here. And then do that again and keep going. Keep going until I say stop or pull harder or let up. The guy in the back's the one in charge. All right, let's go. We're going to go this way. We're going to go that way. Yeah, the person in front is observing, but all they're doing is observing and pulling. So if you start thinking about, well, okay, so that's two people. So now my pipeline, this guy up front is learning about the canoe. This guy in the back is doing the direction, right? So we're doing this based on how we're paddling. Now this guy in the front has an understanding of the canoe, and he's learning the stroke, because we can do that. I've taught that many times years ago. Now he can get in the back, and we put somebody else in the front. And we can continue to do those sort of rotations, and this is just one-on-one, you can do it in a group in different pairings, but it's still that pipeline of development. And I think that pipeline of development is the fact that you're sharing the person in the back, the coxswain, to use that term, the person in the back that's steering the boat. Yeah, technically, are they truly in charge? Are they the captain of the canoe? Well, in the way I grew up, yes. But you start to think about some other things, and we won't go down those rabbit holes. Let's just say the guy in the back's the one in charge, because he understands how to steer the boat, how to point it in different directions. And he's developing the person in the front. That's a one-to-one relationship that we're developing. Man, that was how I learned. Somebody didn't just say, get in the back of the canoe and figure it out. I got in the front of the canoe. We went through some instructional things there on the shoreline and in various places, maybe even in a lake where there wasn't a current. And then we tackled the mighty Brazos, and I learned that how to paddle. I learned how to do the strokes in the back, because the person I was riding with, who was in the back doing the steering, taught me those things. And then put me back there and said, all right, your turn. Give it a shot. Test it out. Let us know. You got questions, start to implement. That's how you develop that pipeline. You give that responsibility. You've heard me talk about the trust triad many times. The trust triad is trust yourself, trust your team to do their job, and your team trusts you. Well, if you trust them to do their job, and you trust yourself in those decisions, then let them do it. Let them give it a shot. Let them see. Let them learn and develop. Let them have aspirations for more responsibility. Can I tell you what, by the way, we're not talking to somebody who doesn't want more. We're talking to people who want to learn, want to grow, team leaders who want their team to succeed, because that's what leadership is. You want your team to succeed. It's not about you. We're talking to those kind of people here, not the person that's perfectly happy where they are, doing their day-to-day tab A in slot B, tab A, slot B for 8 hours. Hey, if that's what you want to do with your life, fine. You ain't watching this, though, I can tell you that. And you ain't watching anything that we've got going on unless somebody's forcing you into it.
But talking about forcing them, I think that's a big key. A lot of the time with leadership pipeline, and really just a talent pipeline is another way to look at it, because you really should be replicating this even with those kind of roles, to where you can have somebody who is doing the tab A to slot B, and you can get more and more of that done, or whatever that looks like in your example. But the idea of you are just giving them the opportunity to develop themselves to get better, but it is not forced. I think that is such a key piece of it, because that is such a huge mistake that a lot of people make, which is the best mechanic becomes a shop manager, and it's like, well, no, he wants to be a mechanic, and he's not going to enjoy that job. He might not be good at that job. And by offering them the resources to develop themselves, you're going to help to get them better at their job. They might want to advance in it, or they might just be better in their role there, or might have a little bit of knowledge to put in their back pocket. You're not losing anything by developing them with that. But when you try to force people to stick to that, that's where you are going to build all sorts of weird resentment inside of the team that, all the communication skills in the world you're gonna need them to try to resolve that problem in your team, because they're gonna be confused about why you're forcing them to do things that they don't really want to do because you don't understand them and all that kind of stuff. But the opportunity should be there. And I think that's the other piece that people usually miss with it, is it's forcing people. It's not developing people in the first place, forcing people to go through the development and to move through the pipeline. And then the last one is that they only view this inside of their business, and it's a very selfish thing of, I'm developing you so you could be my COO later. And if you are going to leave this company, God damn it, I am going to rain hell down upon find who poached you from me and all this kind of, and it's this really, really selfish, really fear-based motivation that a lot of people have. And the example, and I think I might have said this on the show, if not, it's just more you and I just talking leadership other times, but I think it's so silly. And the example I always bring up with it when we've talked about this before is that the coaching family trees in football. You see this a lot. The Nick Saban family tree, and you map out all of his defensive coordinators and how they went on to be the head coach here and all this kind of stuff. Do you think he's like, damn it, Otis was the best defensive coordinator, I lost him? He's like, no, go coach at A&M, go coach at Auburn, whatever it is. He's excited about them because it is their development that he cares about, not a selfish reason, but it's a selfless idea of, I just want you to get better and enjoy yourself and find the right thing for you. And when you have that approach of that family tree, then even if they leave your company, who freaking cares? I think of that example, and I've never, maybe because you've had more corporate time than me, because I've had zero. But I wonder if there's an example like this, but I've never heard anybody talk about again, the Nick Saban family tree, and you can point out to all these great head coaches that were underneath him. Same thing with Belichick. People talk about Belichick too. There's all of these things like that. Well, where's Jeff Bezos' family tree? And it's like, oh gosh, well, everyone there just really is so good at, we always give Amazon the props for supply chain management, right? And it's like every great supply chain management guy comes from Jeff Bezos because he's developing people all that kind of way. I can't think of any examples like that. I mean, that's one I just made up, of course, but have you ever heard anything like that? Because that seems like something I would wear very proudly as a CEO.
Not in that way. I've seen more of these guys work together at this company, and now they're over at this company, and they all got back, pulled each other together again.
Get the band back together.
Yeah, it's kind of it's more of a get the band back together than the development. And man, the development in that sense in the business world, I think there's so much potential there, because if I develop you and you grow up and somebody says, hey, I want you to be COO of this $50 million business and help us grow to 150, 200 million or whatever, right? Something like that. Well, guess what? I've got that connection there. that partnership there. Whether even if we're in different industries, we still have that connection into those organizations that comes back to the personal relationship development of it, and I think that's huge. In one of the industries that I was in, that was a fundamental thing, was the personal relationship, because that opened the door to new business.
Yeah.
So if somebody left, we always hoped that they left because it was the right time in their life, those sort of things, not because it was adversarial or being squashed down or anything like that. It was all about developing that person so they can have more in life. And then, what's really cool is maybe they'll go away, get some other experience, as go from manager for me to COO for that company, and then come back over here to me and be COO for me. Now talk about, you get that outside experience brought back into your company, and it all comes back to this pipeline. And in the sense of true leadership is, how do I help my team members develop and succeed and have more success in life? And that's what it really amounts to. And I think that's something that a lot of organizations miss out on. And you hit the nail on the head with the whole, that son of a gun just leaving here like this. How dare he? And after all I did for him.
What happens? Like energy attracts. If you're selfish as a leader and you treat people like that, you think everyone's trying to steal from me. Employees are just thieves, and no one wants to do their job. You're going to attract people who don't want to do their freaking job. Like, it's such a simple thing. If you are selfish in the way that you are, almost like picturing like hiding information, like somebody sends you the email or like a job recommendation. I really want to hire Otis, and I'm shredding it, like out of a freaking scene out of a movie. But if you're doing that, well, then you're probably embezzling from me, because you're picking up on that same crappy energy I'm putting out. That's probably why you're working. Like, there's a lot to be said for that, because that just poisons your culture, and people can sense that, whether they see it or not. They're going to sense it. And I think, do you have something on that? Because I was going to shift gears. But,
no, go ahead.
And then I think there's this interesting, almost like a devil's advocate type thing I want to play on it. And the use of the word devil's advocate there is funny, because I'm going to reference a movie that I thought was a dumb chick flick that actually was pretty darn funny, which was Devil Wears Prada. I saw that for the first time earlier this year. Decently funny movie. But there's Anne Hathaway has the job, and she's the assistant, and it's like they all talk about, it's like, well, you just do this for a year and then you can go do anything, right? And I think there's an interesting hypothetical there to talk through with this. Is that a problem? So you take the family tree like we were talking about, right? And the assistant role, maybe that doesn't quite make sense for our example, because we're talking about developing through the pipeline. Yeah. But we'll take a sports example, right? If you're Nick Saban and every one of your assistant coaches goes to the NFL, then are you attracting people for the wrong reason? Does that, in the same kind of way, the selfish things I was talking about earlier poison the culture? Does that perspective, even if you as the leader are coming in a selfless way, the intentions of the folks coming for the job might not be quite pure? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a problem? Because I obviously we both believe in this idea of the leadership pipeline and how important it is to a team. Try to poke some holes in the pipeline, and that's the only one that really comes to mind as something that's kind of insidious there.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because it also correlates with a belief that exists now, because I've been told it's actually taught in business schools at various universities, is that you get your first job, you work for 2 years, you jump to the next job. We had Gary Smith on the other day and talked about that very subject. And you might be like Texas A&M for a while was known as a linebacker university. If you were a good linebacker in high school and you desired to get into the NFL as a linebacker, you had that vision for yourself, then Texas A&M needed to be one of the top schools on your list, because they became. There's a lot of Texas A&M football players that are linebackers that are playing in the NFL and have played in the NFL. So if you understand that in a business, that, okay, people are going to come to me because they want to do X. If you understand that, if you're a self-aware enough leader, I think you can use that to your advantage.
Yeah.
I really do, because if I can recruit the top talent and have them for 2 years, 24 months, take 3 months on the front side for them to learn the job, now I get them for 21 months of high performance, top notch. I could work with that. I could, but you got to be aware of it. And then when they leave, they leave with a great recommendation, and the door is open. If you want to come back, I'll always welcome you back, as long as there's a position for you, because you've already experienced that. You spent the money to train them. You want them to come back. You want them to go out, see what grass is like on the other side, because I've seen this a lot too. The grass ain't any greener. A lot of times it tastes like crap, and you're stuck on the other side of the fence and going, damn, I wish I wouldn't have left. I didn't realize how good I've had it. I've had clients that have done that. And it's shocking, and sometimes you got to do it. But I also think, as a leader, you got to allow them to do it, and not be all pissy
How many times you tell your kid the stove's hot before you just let them touch it?
Yeah.
There's an aspect of that there. That's not because you don't care that they're going to burn their hand. It's because they need to learn the lesson themselves. There's a lot to be said with that, with the grass is greener type of thing. Now, thinking there, again, trying to poke holes in the concept a bit, devil's advocate a little. The other thing that comes to mind is we kind of talked about what I would call the overflowing pipeline at the top end, that the assistant coaches are going off to go be head coaches and that kind of thing, right? Where it's all very successful. It could also overflow at any point throughout the pipeline. And you talking about A&M, being a linebacker factory. Maybe think Cowboys used to have a running back factory. I don't know what the hell happened with that, but that's a whole another episode right there. But we joke, or I'll give Coco his credit. It's his joke first, but we joke with U of A that it's like we're like a scrum half factory. It's like we're scrum half you. We got it's the amount of scrum halves that want to come here. It's weird sometimes. We got some really, really, really talented guys. And there's this interesting thing that then happens when you have an absolute stud in that starting position. Because you look at the rugby team, for folks who don't fully know, you got your 15 starting players, 23 total, right? So usually you'd have room for, let's call it, 2 scrum halves in that 23. Usually it's more of a hybrid guy for that second one, but it depends. So if you have 2 sides that you're playing with, 2 games on a weekend, you got 4 spots. One of those guys is playing 60 to 80 minutes, or one of those guys on each team is playing 60 to 80. The other guy is playing 0 to 20. Not really sure, right? There's that reduction as it goes. Obviously, if you're in the 2s, it's a less quality of a game, those kind of things there, right? There is that drop off. Well, what happens then is that number 3 guy might go, I really want to play varsity one day, but I ain't beating him. I've known, because I've done fitness testing with him and I've seen his pass, and gosh, his box kick is amazing. All these kind of things, right? That you could see and look, I know I'm not going to pass him. So then you kind of get this overflow in the middle of your pipeline, where you might be really, really good at attracting the right people, developing them. But if you don't have a job for them, then they're going to leave, or they're going to get frustrated. There's problems with that. What are your thoughts on how to fix an overflow in the middle of the pipeline? I think is the best way to put it.
Well, I mean, what comes to mind right now is the transfer portal. And I think the transfer portal became what it is today because of what you just described. I mean, the other day saw that the guy who started for Texas A&M this year at quarterback is in the transfer portal because he got benched.
Yep.
And there are times and places, this kind of goes into the broader sense of, to stay in a kind of a football analogy of in the draft, you draft the best athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that only goes so far. Right? Because if every time it came around to my turn and I drafted the best athlete, and each time it was a running back or an offensive tackle, I mean, what am I going to do with 4 offensive tackles? Mm-hmm. What am I going to do with 4 running backs or whatever? Yeah, the whole competition and things like that. I think in the college sense, and this is a problem that college football coaches are dealing with right now, is how do I create a program, a culture that attracts people and keeps them? Because it used to be you would have a senior, and quarterback's the easiest one because it's the most obvious. Mm-hmm. You would have a senior quarterback as the starter his senior year. You'd have sophomore or junior as the backup, and then you'd have a redshirt freshman. That was the way most colleges operated. Some of them even had one for each grade level. And the whole principle was I'm developing that kid for 4 years to where he becomes a starter. Mm-hmm. Well, it doesn't work that way anymore. And it kind of goes back to, what did I say earlier?
Well, to use the example there, because I think this is another way that it gets messed up there, because people go, well, when I was a freshman, the senior was starting, and then Joe started my sophomore year because he was a senior now, and so it's my turn. Right. And then some stud freshman comes in and takes your spot. And I think you could get a similar kind of thing in business a lot of the time, that people think they're on that trajectory, and there's a reality check or whatever it is there. Another way that pipeline can kind of break in the middle there.
Oh yeah. You see that all the time. I shouldn't say all the time. That's an overused phrase. But I have seen that where Joe has been with this company for 20 years and he's been loyal and he's been putting in the time, and he's expecting to be promoted to vice president of sales, and then they hire somebody from outside and bring them in to be vice president of sales. Well, the problem is not that they did that, but they hadn't been communicating to Joe the whole time about it. Or they've been faking it and lying to Joe about, hey, you're going to be my vice president of sales. I know you're going to be my vice president of sales. They've been feeding him that whole line because they're being selfish and they don't want Joe to leave because he has all this inherent knowledge and he's a pretty good salesman. But this other guy is a much better vice president of sales guy. That's, I don't think that's a poor manager, possibly leader, who is not setting expectations for his team. Because what you should be doing in that situation is telling Joe, I just don't think you're made for this role. I don't think you've got the right skills and mindset for it. I'll help you with the skills, but you have to fix your mindset. You got to have those conversations.
And I think that's an interesting piece there, talking about that conversation and communicating with them clearly. Because what comes to mind for me is the fact that people struggle with those conversations, struggle with the feedback and giving honest feedback. The reason that one of the many reasons that we love sports so much is because it's a meritocracy. The best guy is going to start on Saturday. That's generally speaking, in most environments, that's how it's going to go. There can be a weird push and pull with that sometimes. We have Duffy has a saying with the U of A guys that it's, if you're good enough, you're old enough. I don't care if you're a freshman. If you're a stud, you could start. You can win a starting spot. There's this funny sentiment. I can say this because I've seen it as a coach and I've seen it when I was playing also in the same system. There's this funny thing that happens where then you have a senior who's kind of half-assing a bit. Love you guys, but because I've got a few of my buddies that are coming to mind, but might not be fully into it, might not be committed to his development in the gym, those kind of things, right? Maybe he's just plateaued and that's his ceiling for his rugby career. There's all sorts of different things that can be going on there. But then they go, oh, well, Coach Cam, he just wants to develop the freshmen, or they just want this and those kind of things. It's really easy in that meritocracy environment for me to go, no, his tackle rate's higher than yours. His work rate is better. He can jump in the line out, his push in the scrum. I can point to all of these particular things. And then, like we've talked about work-ons and how I think more businesses need their work-ons. Then that senior, instead of going, oh, Camden just always plays a freshman, now it's I can't pass with my left hand. And there's this really honest moment there. And he's not feeling like he's getting put down because we've had those conversations before. He knows it's just constructive and it's just merit-based. Where do you think that falls short in business? Is it the gut on it of why business is less meritocracy in that way is nepotism is the word that comes to mind. I don't think necessarily literally family though, but like kind of that like detracts like, and I want, ducks like ducks type of thing. And I don't know, what are your thoughts there? What have you seen with that? Or maybe even the military experience? Because I think there's a lot of the meritocracy in the military, but then at the same time, there's a lot of political system and weird things in it.
Yeah, the military is actually easier to explain because of the way the promotions system works. Is your boss is the dude who's sitting on the board and making recommendations on whether or not you get promoted. And a couple of things happen there. One, if your boss is successful, then he's sitting on the board and he likes you, then you're going to be successful. If your boss is not successful, he's not sitting on the board, you're not going to get promoted. If your boss is successful and is sitting on the board and he doesn't like you, you're not getting promoted. If your boss is successful and likes you, there's a very good chance, and there's been studies in the military, particularly the Army, about this, that the culture of the Army is the way it is because the people sitting on the board tend to promote people like themselves. Oh, look at that guy. He's doing that. He's done that, and that. That's what I did. Look how successful I am. So I want to promote that guy. And it's a promoting people that are like me, and it's a human factor.
Can I say a really funny example of it? I've had this happen to me coaching rugby. I see a tall, skinny kid, and I'm like, how is that? That's hard, and it's hard, and it's a hard game when you're tall and skinny. You got to learn how to be low and all this kind of stuff, and all these kind of things. But I see that, and I'm like, oh gosh, that's so good. Imagine if I rolled out 8 tall, skinny kids in my forward pack. We wouldn't win a scrum. It doesn't make any sense, right?
Well, so it's that sense in the Army. In business, I think the long pole in the tent. The long pole in the tent and in the business world is everybody wants to be liked and everybody's too busy to spend time because you can't just walk by the dude and say, hey, you're doing that wrong, fix it, talk to me later. You got to have a conversation. You got to sit down and say, all right, man, here's what's going on, here's what you're doing, and everybody's too busy to do that. Well, then guess what's going to happen? You ain't going to have a pipeline.
Yep.
You aren't developing people because you're too busy trying to win the next contract. I got too much going on to spend time developing my team members to make them better leaders.
Talk about the whirlwind and getting caught in the whirlwind. To use the coaching example, because it's not like every single time I'm talking to an athlete I'm having this nice conversation, but you create the space for it. And then when you need to just go, hey, I just need you to get lower and hit a breakdown and something like that, and I can just yell it, then it's okay, yes sir, because they understand what the expectations are because we communicated to them in this kind of an environment where I can say, hey, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I want from us, here's what's going on there. If you are too busy, you don't take the time, again, that quick yelling, that very authoritative leadership, whatever you want to call it, right? Well, if you coach like that all the time, if you lead like that all the time, then guess what? It's going to start falling on deaf ears. They're going to think you hate them because you're constantly snapping at them and those kind of things. And if you take the time, then you can build a culture and a relationship with folks to where you can give them that firm, hard advice, even though you're doing it quickly, but it's because they understand and they know they can have a conversation with you. Not, hey, ask me if you need anything, or hey, all that kind of stuff that is just a like, well, no, I'm too busy. Hey, talk to me later. Well, sir, your calendar's full. Like, it's like those kind of things, right? That's, I think, the key there is making sure you are being proactive with it. Yeah, just not acting like you're too busy, because the investment in the relationships and the conversations is so worth it.
Yeah. Well, and these sort of things and these discussions are worth it, because what I learned today is that I don't think I want to be a college football coach. I don't know how what has happened in the whole portal thing. It is extremely difficult, because part of what you do as a college football coach, besides you got to win to keep your job, but you're supposed to be developing these young men.
Yep.
And in that development, you also want to create this positive culture. Well, I can play the game all day long and talk about a positive culture is going to keep them in, But you know what? In the sense of what my aspirations may be in the sport, if I have aspirations that I'm better than the guy in front of me, or at least as good, that the culture, and I have a little bit of selfishness, because I think that's part of it also, I'm going to go look for another opportunity.
Yeah.
So that I can be the starter and prove that I'm as good as him. Because you know what's on the line. What's the minimum salary for the NFL now?
$250K.
It's got to be more than that. I was going to say $750 for an undrafted free agent rookie.
Yeah. It's huge.
That's a lot of freaking money for a 22, 23-year-old.
And it gets life-changing, generational if you play it right. Like,
it is. Whether you put cash down on your first house and you only play that first year or whatever, and anybody that knows those numbers, feel free to put it in the comments.
Yeah.
It is that sort of a life-changing thing. So there's a bit of self-preservation. So how do you handle that? So, I used to think that was an area I wanted to go into. Right now, don't think I'm ready to accept that challenge.
It's funny, because we talked about the value of the transfer portal, as we're talking about the pipeline, was to solve that break in the middle, right? Well, I think the problem that we're seeing, and that's become perpetuated inside of college football, is the people at the top of the pipeline doing it. And I think that is such a big difference. It's not I'm the star. It's not I'm third string. I'm not going to get to play. I love football. I want to play, or I want to go somewhere I could start. I want to be the big fish. I want to be the big fish in the small pond. Whatever whatever you want to put it. It's become I need to go to that school because they can win, and then completely transfer. You're already the starter. You're already at the top of your development, and I think that's why it's so broken in that way. But I want to add one other thing, because we always talk about open up new rabbit holes with what I learned. That's the really interesting thing to me about what Bill Belichick is doing with UNC. I haven't completely done a deep dive into it, but the bits I've seen of him talking about what he wants to do is a kind of a entrepreneurial solution to the transfer portal. He's talking about the development and getting the culture, the systems to get to the NFL. Because the other thing, if you've heard Tom Brady, every week I've heard him mention this on his announcing, talking about how the college quarterbacks are no longer being developed to be NFL quarterbacks, because there's a disconnect because of these same kind of things we're talking about. The incentive structure is wrong. Well, how do you change an incentive structure? Freaking start a business, right? You change it, and that's what he's doing, or what it seems like he's trying to do with UNC, which I think is a really fascinating, like I said, very entrepreneurial approach to solving that problem. Because if they win a national championship, that's a whole nother thing. But they start winning, they do well, not even a national championship, and those guys go to the league. Now A&M's got to do that. Now every coach has to go, I have to create my pipeline. And it's going back towards what they were originally trying to do for a lot of those places, which was develop them to be NFL players. But the incentive structure got all jacked up.
So what'd you learn?
What I learned was the difference between oars and paddles. And that oars are attached to the boat. And paddles are not. And that canoes have paddles.
And by the way, you can row in the same sense that you can paddle. Your row boat still requires friction, just like your motor boat still requires friction to turn and steer.
There you go.
So there's your physics lesson, your buoyancy physics lesson. And you know, if you want help creating your pipeline for your business, then go to 10xyourteam.net, click on the system, learn more about our Green Beret Leadership Program. It is there to help you build a pipeline in your business. You know, I think we're recording this, so we'll put a mark on the wall for next book title, you know, because my old boss, Stan McChrystal, has a team of teams. I think we need to write a book called Team of Leaders. Because that, when you lead leaders, nothing's going to stop you. It's explosive growth. That's why we say 10x. Because
I'm sorry, we're workshopping a bit here. I'd go leader of leaders.
Leader of leaders, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
So, you know, General McChrystal, appreciate your book. Appreciate working for you too, by the way, boss. That was always a lot of fun. But we got the sequel coming, so we marked it down today. So go to 10xyourteam.net. I got one more thing for you. If you watch the show this long, make sure you subscribe. And here's your bonus for today. I'll do this, maybe first bonus we've ever done. Steel Men Tribe.
Ooh.
Telling you about it now. You've probably seen, if you read our newsletter, Monday Moments, maybe some of it, if you're a subscriber, you've seen me, some words of it. The Steel Men Tribe is about building a tribe of men who want to lead successfully, that want to lead as men lead together, not alone, not off in the desert, not alone and unafraid or naked and afraid. It's men leading men to lead a change in the world. And that is part of fulfilling our legacy and our purpose, which is to create a legacy of great leaders. So keep your eye out for the Steel Men Tribe. More will be coming out very soon. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. And a special thanks to, once again, Otis for coming down to the desert here and spend some time with us and the family. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass it along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so they can enjoy it too. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and subscribe on YouTube, just like he said. And if you want a full archive of these episodes, go to www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see y'all next time.